Joining us live now, freedom of religion advocate and founder and president of the Hardwired Global, Tina Ramirez. Tina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Shemane.
So, describe the situation for our viewers at home, what is going on right now and why it's gotten so bad.
Mm-hmm. My organization is called Hardwired. It's the idea that we're hardwired to be free and that our freedom of conscience and belief and religion is really our most fundamental freedom, because for any human being, it's what keeps us going. But around the world, over 81% of the world's population live in countries where they don't have this fundamental freedom to believe what they want and to live out their beliefs freely without fear of oppression. And in Iran right now, the situation is horrific. And I'm sure many of your viewers have seen that women have been protesting in the streets across Iran, these new policies where they are forced to be wearing their headscarves and hijabs. And if they are not, they're being brutally attacked by morality police that are essentially, their whole job is to enforce a morality code on these women. Last year, one woman that refused to wear her hijab was taken into police custody and killed. And so since then, these protests have broken out across Iran, and really protest over the horrific killing of this woman that was really just wanting to express her beliefs and her conscience and her freedom. And that's not permitted in Iran. And so as a result, over 500 women have been executed and around 20,000 people have been taken into police custody and sadly will be tortured, I'm sure, over these policies. But they've started actually putting cameras across the country to monitor women that are wearing hijabs or not, and then to come after them. So it's just a horrific situation. And my heart breaks for the women there and for what they're facing.
How did you become so involved in this and become an advocate for these women who desperately need your help and our help and bringing awareness to this issue?
Mm-hmm. Well, the women of Iran really don't have a voice within their country, as we're seeing. They are standing up at risk of their own lives and trying to stand up for really what I believe we're all hardwired for, which is the freedom to believe according to your own conscience and convictions. But that right doesn't exist in Iran, like in many countries. And so the least that we can do is stand with them. The least we can do is draw attention to what's happening to them and be a voice for them as other women and people of faith around the world that recognize that no one should be attacked or oppressed because of who they are and what they believe. And that message needs to be heard loud and clear around the world. If there was a women's march for these women in Iran, imagine how different the situation would look today. We can march over so many different issues here in America for women, but not for women that are literally just trying to take off a headscarf and express something that they believe in the way they dress and in their expressions. It's one of the smallest things that they should have the freedom to do, and yet it's denied because in Iran they live in a country that wants to force them to believe like the dictatorial regime that rules the country. And these women have no dignity and no freedom. There are women across Iran who are having acid thrown in their faces and that are being physically attacked by morality police across the country. The situation is just horrific. And so I think as women and people of faith, we should be standing alongside them and saying enough is enough. You need to let these people have the freedom and dignity that they were born with, that we believe that they were created to have.
Absolutely. And God bless you for doing this and for speaking out. How much worse did it get with this administration versus the previous administration?
Well, we saw in Iran that both under the Obama administration and under the Biden administration, there have been protests in Iran, and the U.S. has not responded, and the people and the situation there has gotten much worse. We know Iran is a rogue nation that wants to pursue nuclear weapons, that wants to attack Israel and other nations. We know that it is supporting terrorists across the region. I was recently in Iraq and in villages that were once held by Christian communities that were forced to flee when ISIS came in. ISIS is no longer there, but in the political vacuum, Iranian-backed tribes have moved into those communities. And when you drive through the checkpoints across Iraq, you see images of all the Iranian leaders at those checkpoints. And it's terrifying for the communities that live there because they don't want to live under Iranian rule. The women, the people of Iran don't want to live under Iranian rule. No one does. But we have an administration that's not willing to stand up whether it's in Iraq, outside of Iran's purview, or even within Iraq, and say that this is wrong and that Iran will not have supremacy in the world or in the region. They will not gain a nuclear weapon. They will not terrorize their subjects like that. We need to stand up for religious freedom, but we have an administration that's not able to do that in any capacity, whether it's in Iran or whether it's in Ukraine or whether it's in Taiwan or anywhere else in the world. And so we see rogue regimes like this taking advantage of its citizens, and we see the humanitarian situation worsen and unravel. And unfortunately, that's what happens, when you choose political leaders that are unable to show strength and resolve for the values as Americans that we stand for, values of human rights, the value of religious freedom, the value of democracy, and of people being able to protest peacefully and dissent from government, which is what these women are trying to do, dissent from a moral religious code that's being forced upon them. They have every right to do that.
Absolutely. How does your organization help fight back against this tyranny?
Yeah. Right now, we are not working in Iran. We are watching and monitoring the situation closely and obviously trying to raise awareness to it, because this is what happens when religious freedom fails in any country or doesn't exist. In those kinds of situations, you have countries that take advantage of every aspect of people's lives, and women and children disproportionately suffer. We are working in Iraq, right next door to Iran, as I said, where Iran is trying to influence the situation, particularly in the north. And in northern Iraq, in Mosul and the Nineveh Plains, as many of your viewers may know, in 2014, ISIS came in and decimated the entire region, kicked out Yazidis and Christians and other religious communities. They sexually enslaved 6,000 Yazidi girls. Christians, essentially it was a genocide against Christians and Yazidis. Those communities, now that ISIS has been defeated, are coming back into Iraq and are trying to rebuild and restore their communities. But the ideas of ISIS, the ideas of intolerance and violence and religious extremism continue to dominate the area. And so my company, Hardwired, has been going into Mosul and the Nineveh Plains, and in collaboration with the government there, with the Department of Education in these regions, has been working to train teachers in religious freedom. And in training teachers in religious freedom, we're actually able to shift the mindset of children that have been brainwashed by ISIS to be terrorists to instead embrace religious freedom and the rights of others, and help these women and girls in communities that fled to come back in, and instead of attacking them, to value their dignity, to value the dignity and rights of girls, to value the religious freedom of Christians and Yazidis and others. And I was just in Iraq 2 weeks ago on the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War, and what I saw after doing this project for several years now in Iraq has been a marked shift in the climate of these communities, where even communities that had been held by, they were very sympathetic to ISIS, are beginning to embrace religious freedom. And it really is encouraging that when we have religious freedom, so many other rights come with it. When we don't have religious freedom, every other right falls. And so this isn't just a first freedom here in America. It's something that every person in the world is really hardwired to have and should have. And so we fight for that through education and training in the countries where we work around the world. And one of those happens to be Iraq.